In the quiet town of Harwick Falls, a place where everyone knows their neighbor, where the local diner still writes your order on a notepad, and where the sight of a state trooper's cruiser on the highway feels like a reassurance rather than a warning. No one expected that the greatest threat to peace would come from inside the badge itself. It was a Tuesday morning in late October when a jogger named Rachel Simmons spotted something through the tree line off Route 9. First, she thought it was a deer. Then she saw the color pale blue, the kind of pale blue that belongs to a uniform. By the time the first responders arrived, the autumn leaves had already begun to settle around the body of Trooper Dana Collier, 34 years old, single, 7 years on the force, and by all accounts, one of the best officers the Harwick Falls State Police Barracks had ever seen. But Dana Collier had a secret, and that secret, investigators would soon discover, had gotten her killed. To understand what happened to Dana Collier, you have to understand how she met Trooper First Class Marcus Hale. Marcus Hale, 41, was everything the department pointed to when they talked about decorated officers. 14 years on the force. Commendations for valor. A wife named Carol. 2 daughters, 9 and 11. A house with a porch swing on Elm Grove Drive. He and Dana were assigned as patrol partners 2 years before her death. Long shifts, shared silences on empty highways, the kind of trust that forms between two people who depend on each other to come home alive. By most accounts, they were professional, respectful, colleagues, but by accounts that only came to light after Dana's body was found, they were something else entirely. Former colleague Officer Brett Salinas would later say in a deposition, "I noticed things, small things, the way she'd look at him across the briefing room, the way he'd always offer to take her shift if she was tired. I didn't want to think what I was thinking." The affair had reportedly begun 18 months before Dana's death, born in the pressure cooker of late-night patrols, formed in the space between two people who spent more time together than with their own families. For a while, they were careful. Burner phones, motels 2 counties over, separate vehicles at shift's end. But secrets, especially in small towns, have a way of breathing. 3 months before the murder, something changed. Dana Collier had reportedly grown tired of the arrangement. According to text messages later recovered from a deleted cloud backup, messages that investigators painstakingly reconstructed, Dana had begun pushing for Marcus to leave his wife. One message, sent on a Thursday night at 11:47 p.m., read, "I can't keep doing this. Either we're real or we're nothing." Marcus's response came 4 minutes later. "Give me time, please." But time was the one thing Dana was no longer willing to give. Investigators believe she had reached a breaking point. She had begun confiding in her younger sister, Leah Collier, who would later become a key witness. "She told me she was in love with someone she shouldn't be. She never said his name, but she said she was scared of what would happen if things went wrong." Those were her exact words. Scared of what would happen. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale's behavior at work began to shift. Colleagues noticed he was irritable, distracted. On at least 2 occasions, supervisors noted he'd been slow to respond to radio dispatch. He was a man under pressure, and pressure in the wrong man becomes something dangerous. On the night of October 14th, Marcus Hale signed off shift at 10:45 p.m. Standard. Routine. He drove home, at least that's what the vehicle log showed. But according to cell tower data that investigators would later subpoena, his personal phone pinged a tower near the Route 9 overlook at 11:22 p.m., a location 11 miles from his home. A location less than a quarter mile from where Dana Collier's body would be found the next morning. Dana had texted him at 10:51 p.m. "We need to talk. Tonight. You know where." She never sent another message. What happened at the Route 9 overlook is reconstructed from forensic evidence, witness testimony, and the eventual confession of Marcus Hale himself. He met her there. She had driven herself. There was an argument. Investigators believe Dana told him she intended to report the relationship to their supervisor. Not out of malice, she may have reasoned, but because she could no longer carry the weight of it alone. Marcus Hale, a man whose entire identity was wrapped in his badge, his marriage, his community standing, heard that and panicked. The medical examiner's report would later note that Dana Collier died of blunt force trauma consistent with a struggle. She had defensive wounds on her forearms. She had fought back. She was left where she fell, among the autumn leaves, off a highway she'd patrolled for 7 years. Marcus Hale drove home, kissed his wife on the cheek, went to bed. The initial investigation cast a wide net. Dana had no known enemies, no estranged family, no threatening history with the public. But experienced homicide investigators know something that newer detectives sometimes miss. When a woman is killed, you look at who was closest to her. And when she worked in law enforcement, you look at who knew how evidence works. Lead detective in our story, Detective Miriam Okafor, later described the first time Marcus Hale's name came up. He was the one who cried first at the scene. I remember thinking, real grief looks like that. But then I thought, so does guilt. Sometimes you can't tell the difference right away. The cell tower data was the first thread. A canvassing of the Route 9 area turned up a gas station camera 2 miles from the overlook. The footage was grainy, but it captured a vehicle, similar in make, model, and color to Marcus Hale's personal truck, heading toward the overlook at 11:09 p.m. and returning at 11:58 p.m. Then came the forensics. A single fiber, caught in a bramble bush 12 feet from Dana's body. Royal blue, consistent with the departmental jacket Marcus Hale had signed out that week. And then the text messages. When investigators examined Dana's phone records and began the process of cloud data recovery, the deleted thread between Dana and an unsaved number began to emerge. The number traced back to a prepaid phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in Dunmore County. But the convenience store had a camera. And the camera had a face. Marcus Hale was called in for what his supervisors described as a routine witness interview, standard procedure for a colleague of the deceased. Detective Okafor would later say she knew within the first 10 minutes. He was too controlled, she recalled. Every cop knows what grief looks like in a cop. It's messy and it's angry. He was measured. He was performing. Still, they were careful. They needed more. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A motel clerk in a neighboring county named Gary Fontaine, who recognized Dana's photo from news coverage and contacted investigators. He confirmed that a woman matching Dana's description had checked into the motel on 6 separate occasions over the past year, always with a man he described as tall, salt and pepper hair, a cop's posture. Gary Fontaine picked Marcus Hale's photo out of a lineup without hesitation. The affair was now confirmed. The motive was now visible. The arrest warrant was signed on November 3rd, 19 days after Dana Collier's body was found among the autumn leaves. They didn't arrest Marcus Hale at the barracks. They didn't give him the dignity of a scene among colleagues. Detective Okafor and 2 plainclothes detectives arrived at his home on Elm Grove Drive at 6:14 a.m., as his daughters were eating breakfast and his wife was making coffee. She would later describe the moment as the world simply stopping. The coffee pot mid-pour, the girls going quiet, the words Marcus Hale, you are under arrest, floating through her kitchen like something from another dimension. He didn't run. He didn't argue. He put down his mug. He looked once at his wife, a look she described as not apologetic but hollow, and he walked to the door. His daughters didn't understand. Not yet. In the interrogation room, Marcus Hale held out for approximately 4 hours. He denied the affair. He denied being at the overlook. He denied knowing anything about Dana's death beyond what any colleague would know. And then Detective Okafor placed the gas station photograph on the table. Then the motel records. Then the reconstructed text messages. Then, quietly, the fiber analysis. The silence that followed lasted, by Detective Okafor's account, almost 3 full minutes. Marcus Hale sat with his hands folded on the table, looking at the evidence spread before him, and something in his expression simply changed. He asked for a moment, and then, in a voice Detective Okafor described as barely above a whisper, he said, I didn't plan it. I need you to know that. I didn't go there to hurt her. He described the argument, Dana's ultimatum, the way she turned to walk back to her car, and the way the panic inside him had overtaken every instinct, every training, every piece of himself he thought he knew. He said he didn't remember the moments clearly after that. That it felt, he said, like watching someone else. Detective Okafor, in our fictional account, would later describe what she felt in that room. Rage, she said simply. Because he was a cop. He knew what he was doing when he left her there. That wasn't a man who lost control. That was a man who made a calculation. The trial of Marcus Hale lasted 11 days. The defense argued for a lesser charge, a crime of passion, a moment of temporary psychological break. They pointed to his record, his commendations, his years of service. The prosecution methodically dismantled the argument. They pointed to the 19 days Marcus Hale had gone to work, sat in briefings, driven his cruiser, worn his badge, while Dana Collier lay in the county morgue. They pointed to the deliberate act of leaving her body without calling for help. They pointed to the calculated destruction of the burner phone, found disassembled in a storm drain 3 blocks from the barracks. This, the prosecution argued, was not a man who had lost control. This was a man who had made choices, one after another, each one colder than the last. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They returned a verdict of murder in the 2nd degree. Marcus Hale was sentenced to 25 years to life. He would be eligible for parole at the age of 66. He would never work in law enforcement again. His certification was stripped the day of his conviction. His commendations were quietly removed from the department's wall of honor. Carol Hale filed for divorce before the sentencing. She and her daughters moved away from Elm Grove Drive, from Harwick Falls, from everything that had borne his name. Leah Collier, Dana's younger sister, established a small scholarship in Dana's name at the local community college for young women studying criminal justice. The Route 9 overlook was quietly designated by locals as a memorial spot. Someone, no one ever claimed responsibility, planted a small grove of white birch trees near the spot where Dana was found. Every October, someone leaves flowers. The Harwick Falls State Police Barracks underwent a departmental review. New protocols for reporting internal relationships were established. Peer support resources were expanded.